So what exactly is a Victoria Cross and why was it formed? Well, today we're going to find out. Hello and welcome back to FOR-VALOUR. Today we're taking a look at the origin story of the Victoria Cross, why and when it was created and who was the very first recipient. During the peak of colonial rule and global reaching empires, the Crimean War was a conflict born out of three major factors. Concern over the expansion of the Russian Empire through the Russo-Turkish Wars, a rise in nationalism, particularly in the Ottoman Empire, and a growing desire between France and Great Britain to protect the Ottoman Empire, therefore ensuring stability and a balance of power within Europe. The tipping point preceding the conflict was relating to Christian minority rights in Palestine, which was under Ottoman Empire rule at the time. The French were promoting and protecting the rights of the Roman Catholics, while the Russians were protecting the rights of the Eastern Orthodox Church. The aforementioned churches settled their differences with the Ottoman Empire, reaching an agreement, or rather renewing an agreement, known as the status quo. Unfortunately, the French Emperor Napoleon III and the Russian Tsar Nicholas I couldn't achieve the same result. Tsar Nicholas I issued an ultimatum stating, or rather demanding, that Eastern Orthodox Christians in the Ottoman Empire should fall under the protection of the Tsar. In an attempt to calm the situation, Britain mediated an agreement in the form of a compromise, which Tsar Nicholas I initially agreed to. When the Ottoman Empire wanted to modify the agreement, Tsar Nicholas I refused, reneged on the deal, and made preparations for war. During the 19th century, in the period prior to the Crimean War, the British military establishment typically only awarded medals to officers with a rank between Major and Colonel. One example of this is the Army Gold Medal of 1808 to 1814, also known as the Peninsular Gold Medal, and this came with an accompanying Army Gold Cross. Interestingly, this Army Gold Cross bears a striking resemblance to the Victoria Cross, but we'll cover that a bit later. Later on in the 19th century, during the period of the Crimean War, there was still no real merit or reward for the common enlisted soldier, other than being mentioned in dispatches. Dispatches were reports written by journalists, or war correspondents as they were known, which was a relatively new idea at the time. The war correspondent would report to the public on events from the front line through the newspapers. Some of the most impactful and insightful reports were written by the Irish journalist William Howard Russell. His reports revolutionised the way people back home learned about what was happening in the war, and is widely considered to be the first proper war correspondent. Some of his more shocking reports detailed the suffering the British soldier had to endure during the Crimean War through lack of equipment and disease. The estimated death toll caused by these logistical and medical issues is around 20,000 men, compared to about 3,500 men actually killed in battle. In these dispatches, men were commended for their bravery, which could lead to a promotion. However, they were in a large broadsheet newspaper, mixed among many other stories, so it was very rare that one man ever stood out from the crowd for his incredible acts of bravery. Enter Captain Thomas Scoble. Captain Thomas Scoble was a former naval captain and now serving as a Liberal Member of Parliament. He regularly read these dispatches written by William Howard Russell, and in December of 1854 he laid out a motion before the House of Commons which stated, "An order of merit should be awarded to persons serving in the Army or Navy for distinguished and prominent personal gallantry, and to which every grade and individual, from the highest to the lowest, may be admissible." Following on from this, in January 1855, the Duke of Newcastle, who was the Secretary of State for War at the time, wrote to Prince Albert discussing a previous conversation they'd had. The Duke proposed, "A new decoration open to all ranks. It does not seem to me right of politic that such deeds of heroism as the war has produced should go unrewarded by any distinctive mark of honour because they are done by privates or officers below the rank of major. The value attached by soldiers to a little bit of ribbon is such as to render any danger insignificant and any privation light if it can be attained." Interest around this so-called Order of Merit had well and truly been ignited. During this period, however, the Secretary of State for War, the Duke of Newcastle, had been replaced by Lord Panmure. He picked up where the Duke of Newcastle left off and continued to correspond with Prince Albert regarding this new award, with the Queen herself showing a keen interest in this award and was thoroughly engaged in the proposals. Through these letters, Prince Albert made several penciled changes to the draft warrant, which manifested through discussions with the Queen. By this time, the decision had already been made that the award would carry the name of the Queen and be called the Military Order of Victoria. This, however, was a bit of a mouthful, and it made it sound too exclusive, almost like it was only available to the aristocracy. exactly the opposite of the intention for this medal. Prince Albert continued to make alterations to the draft warrant and scribed a line through the Military Order of Victoria and replaced it with the Victoria Cross. Whenever the Prince came across the word the order, he crossed it out. And in a somewhat summary of the document, he simply wrote,
"Treat it as a cross granted for distinguished service, which will make it simple and intelligible."
Queen Victoria, now fully invested in the idea, began to assess designs for this new cross. And after seeing some of the first drawings, she selected one admission that resembled the Army Gold Cross from the Peninsular War that we mentioned earlier. These two medals, however, couldn't be further from one another in terms of what they stand for, who could earn one, and how they were made. With the initial drawing approved, the Queen had a couple of caveats: that the medal should be a little smaller, and to replace the words "for the brave" to "for-valor", thereby removing the inference that only the brave man in battle would be eligible for the Victoria Cross. Lord Panmure, brandishing the approved commission, headed down to a little-known jeweller's by the name of Hancock's in Bruton Street, London. Established only in 1849, little did they know that they were about to be awarded a contract for arguably the most prestigious and respected medal on the planet. Despite being newly established, Hancock's had developed an impeccable reputation for their silverwork. However, from the very start of this process, it had been decided that the medal would be produced from a base metal such as copper or zinc. The production of the prototype commenced, and upon Queen Victoria's receipt of the initial prototype, she displayed her disdain by stating,
"The cross looks very well in form, but the metal is ugly. It is copper and not bronze, and will look very heavy on a red coat."
A further two changes were commissioned by Queen Victoria, which was the addition of laurel leaves on the bar and a small V connecting the medal to the ribbon. There's no record that I could find who suggested that the medals be made from the bronze of captured Russian cannons, but quickly after the idea was presented, two 18-pounder bronze cannons were collected from Woolwich Barracks by an engineer. The two antique guns, sporting some obviously non-Russian characters, would now be used to produce the Victoria Cross. It wouldn't be addressed until many years later that the guns were actually of Chinese origin and probably never actually in the Crimea, but hey, you got to work with what you got. The initial plan was to stamp out the medals from the bronze using a cutting die. However, the metal proved to be so hard that it cracked the cutting dies, rendering them useless and ruining the quality of the metal. An alternative method of casting was trialled, which involved melting down the bronze and pouring it into a mould cavity. This actually led to a higher relief in the medal along with more depth, resulting in more detail and a better quality than previously achieved. Fast forward to the spring of 1856, with the design and manufacture of the medals now complete, it was time to decide on who would actually be eligible for this medal and who it should be awarded to. Months of delay then followed through Lord Panmure and the various departments that were responsible for this task, including the Army and the Admiralty. Boards of adjudication were created, but it was a long and painstaking process, and it took what seemed like an age to decide who should be eligible. Several commanding officers seized the opportunity to bestow prestige upon their regiment by putting forward dozens of candidates for the medal. One example is the 77th Regiment, which put forward no less than 38 candidates, while 6 regiments put forward none whatsoever. During this drawn-out process, Lord Panmure decreed that the medal should be limited to current hostilities, i.e. the Crimean War. In addition to the medal, a pension was agreed of £10 per year, which in today's money equates to about £1,400 per year. The adjudication painstakingly wound on for another 12 months. Once the adjudication was finally complete, the Queen set a date for the first 62 recipients to receive their medal, which was the 26th of June 1857. The Queen insisted to Lord Panmure that she herself issue as many medals as possible to the first 62 recipients. Preparations for the Grand Parade were hastily scrambled together. For example, the final list of recipients was not printed in the London Gazette until June 22nd, leaving only 4 days to complete preparations. Talk about cutting it fine. As you can imagine, Hancocks were pleased as punch about this, as they only had to inscribe 62 medals with the names of the recipients in less than 96 hours. Oh, and deliver them with 0 mistakes. That was one thing, but then the 62 recipients had to be located and delivered to London, along with detachments from the units that they had served in. Due to the delays in the selection process, some of these men had already left the service, and that meant that they turned up to the ceremony not wearing uniform. But overall, Queen Victoria seemed content with the arrangements that had been made. Another non-negotiable expressed by the Queen is that she herself would attend the ceremony on horseback. Queen Victoria remained on horseback for the entire ceremony, awarding every single medal. Legend has it that Queen Victoria pinned the medal to one Commander Raby through the flesh of his chest rather than his uniform. The commander didn't flinch, however, steadfast in his conviction, and received his medal from the monarch with distinction and pride. The Queen managed to issue all 62 medals in a very swift 10 minutes, which suggests that there wasn't much conversation. But the whole parade was an absolute hit with the public, and it was met with roaring applause and cheering. This award was met with enthusiasm and installed a sense of pride into the nation and its people. This, in my opinion at least, remains the case to this day, and why I believe it's so important that more people learn about this story and the story of each of these incredible men that won the Victoria Cross. So, now we understand what the Victoria Cross is, what it stands for, and who's eligible, we can now begin our quest to recount the story of each and every individual that has been awarded this incredible medal. So, join us next week as we take a look at the story of recipient number 1 of 1,355, this man right here, Charles David Lucas VC. Good night.